Howdy folks, today's Star Wars lore episode is on the planet Kamino. Now before the Ice Age and before the Great Flood, Kamino was a very different planet. The species known as Kaminoans shared the land of the planet's other indigenous creatures. Over time, they adapted to their environment, and this allowed them to become semi-aquatic and flourish above the ground and also beneath the shallow waters on the planet's numerous coastlines. Now, galactic history recorded little of the affairs of this remote world in the Outer Rim until its last ice age smothered much of it in glaciers. The Kaminoans retreated inland as the oceans froze over, and the climate turned inhospitable. The ground became hard, which made mining operations difficult, and the skies became grey with storm clouds. Now, the Kaminoans relied on their ingenuity to survive the change in the planet's landscape. United against the adverse weather that held their planet in an icy grip, the Kaminoans formed tight-knit colonies that endured the freezing conditions. Now, they constructed large communal dwellings using wattle and daub. The dwellings seemed primitive from the outside, but they served their purpose well, keeping the starving animals at bay and shedding water easily during the long storm seasons. As the temperature plummeted, the Kaminoans' credo became survival of the fittest. The land-based species with which they shared their planet began to perish as the glaciers continued their inexorable advance, but the Kaminoans endured in their huge colonies. Generation after generation watched and waited for the ice to melt. Now, research teams carefully monitored the progress of the glaciers, and when the ice finally began to retreat, the news was met with optimism. The Kaminoans looked forward to reclaiming their ravaged planet and returning to the lifestyle of their forebears, dominating the land and making fruitful forays into shallow water. But their hopes would soon be dashed. The temperature rose faster than anyone could have predicted, and the glaciers melted at an alarming rate. Kaminoan documents record that the last ice age gave way to one of the darkest periods in the planet's history, the time of the Great Flood. Over the next few thousand years, the glaciers turned into oceans that gradually consumed the land on the planet. The Kaminoan colonies became further isolated as huge communities uprooted themselves in the search for a higher land on which to construct new dwellings. Now, in the latter years of the Great Flood, the Kaminoans clung desperately to the few plateaus left above sea level. Now, the colonies decreased in number but increased in population as the fight for survival once more forced the struggling species to adapt to its planet's inhospitable climate. Now, the Kaminoan scientists had long since predicted an inescapable truth. The Great Flood would end only when the last remaining land on the planet had been submerged. Technology had advanced considerably since the days of wattle and daub dwellings, but the design of the Kaminoans' new cities would nevertheless echo their predecessors' more primitive habitats. The designs were approved and construction soon began on the last remaining land plateaus. As the Kaminoans built ever higher, the ominous sound of the waves lapping at their feet served as a chilling reminder that their time was running out. Now, the water swallowed the last of the land, and the Kaminoans peered out from their new cities across a featureless horizon of endless ocean. The Great Flood had robbed the planet of its geographical beauty. Now, as the years went past, the great cities were populated by those who could remember nothing of the plateaus that once punctuated the sea. They learned to find beauty in the changing weather, calling the stormy period of torrential rain the beautiful season. Visitors attempting to disembark on Kaminoan landing platforms during the so-called beautiful season were not as well disposed towards the climate. The weather was not enough to amuse even the clinically minded Kaminoans, however, and they set about creating their own architectural beauty. Tupoka City, the planet's capital, was typical of the colonies dotted around Kamino. Large, saucer-shaped buildings rested upon tall pylons embedded in the shallow continental shelf below. The pylons were relatively narrow, but strong enough to withstand the battering of the waves. The colony buildings were connected by interlinking passages which allowed easy access from one area to another. And protruding towers bristled with communications devices and static discharge equipment that helped the buildings withstand the violent electrical storms. Now, once inside the buildings, visitors were often impressed by the smooth, elegant lines of Kaminoan architecture, but surprised by the Spartan nature of even the most distinguished dwellings. Years of adversity divested Kaminoan culture of materialistic leanings, as they focused their energies on their own survival and their work. Human visitors in particular generally took a few moments to adjust their eyes to the white floors, walls, and ceilings, which bathed Kaminoan rooms in a brilliant reflected light. Now, although this was perfectly in keeping with the Kaminoans' clinical outlook, in fact, they saw colour in the ultraviolet spectrum, and therefore perceived many different shades within the apparently featureless glare. Now, ensconced in their gleaming new cities, the Kaminoans felt safe at last. Countless generations suffered the hardships of the Ice Age and the Great Flood, but the Kaminoans endured where so many of their planet's land-based species have perished. The Kaminoans seemed well able to live within their waterlogged planet's harsh climate, but they paid a terrible, subtle price for their triumph over nature. The Kaminoans became absorbed by their own problems and developed an inward-thinking culture that isolated them from the rest of the galaxy. They turned their backs on the affairs of the Jedi Council and the Republic, concentrating purely on their own survival. It was decided that only the fittest Kaminoans were worthy, and they developed a chilling philosophy of eugenic selection. This led to research into cloning technology, which the immoral Kaminoans embraced wholeheartedly. Now, although the Kaminoans had no interest in the affairs of their neighbouring planets, and would have preferred to have no contact with any other species, pressing economic factors forced them into several uneasy partnerships. Now, the Kaminoans needed money to maintain and develop their technologically advanced culture, but the Great Flood made it difficult for them to exploit their planet's natural resources. Although abundant mineral wealth lay beneath the ground, they were kept from the seabed by turbulent oceans and fearsome sea monsters. It was far easier just to raise funds by developing an export business and enduring limited contact with outsiders. Now, Kaminoan technology boasted many achievements of dubious merit. Innovations came in all sizes. Now, some were as small as the toxic saber dart, while others were big enough to change the course of galactic history, aka their cloning facilities. And that is the planet Kamino. So if you liked the video, leave a like, let me know what you thought of the video, subscribe for more videos, and I will talk to you all in the next one. Later.